Good afternoon, YouTube. I'm in downtown Dayton at the arcade, and more stupidity and more unrealistic dreams have been announced for this once great, grand, and historic structure. The city of Dayton, there was an article in the Dayton Daily News yesterday. Of course, the last couple of days, this has been big news, along with the fact that the fairgrounds development deal fell apart. So it mentions here in the article about the Dayton Arcade here that a $12 to $15 million project to create 60 housing units and common spaces for artists and creative types, which is all just a bunch of bullshit. And it mentions beginning with a roughly $12 to $15 million project. I got news for you, people. It's going to take 6 to 10 times the amount of that just to fix that up. And in a dead town like Dayton, it just ain't going to happen. So every 2 to 4 years, there's a story that comes along, some great hope of development. Nothing ever comes of this, and YouTube, the group that's behind this one, or one of the groups spearheading this, is Miller Valentine Gym, which I actually just got done making a video a little bit ago about the fairgrounds property and how their plans to develop that, fell through, and there was just no demand for it. And it's the same thing here, and I cited maybe the fairgrounds is going to turn into another thing where every 2 or 3 years somebody talks of buying it or fixing it up, and then nothing happens. So Miller Valentine Gym, there's two groups associated with this. Cross Street Partners, a diversified real estate firm in Baltimore, Maryland, and Dayton-based Miller Valentine Group. And they mentioned things like, the development partnership is under contract to purchase the arcade property, which could be finalized in early 17 if the financing for the plan is secured, aka try and steal taxpayer money, all kinds of tax credits, tax handouts, grants, historic credits, that type of stuff. Please say no. If it cannot be funded with private development, it has no business being funded. So, the first phase, it says, mentions calling for the proposal of renovating 2 buildings along West 4th Street into affordable housing for artists and creative professionals. Obviously, this right here, it's not going to happen, people, because the amount of money to fix this up, it's going to be well over $100 million. And who's going to end up paying for that? Artists don't make a whole lot of money as it is to begin with. So you think they're going to be willing to absorb and shoulder the cost? I don't think so, people. So it's just more examples of just stupidity. And it mentions it also, the plan involves constructing common spaces for creative programming possible, such as art galleries and studios. Again, more stupidity. We have the Dayton Art Institute, a fine art museum in the city of Dayton itself. So, this is just more examples of just more stupidity, in this rundown city, and of course, the city leaders and the mayor, Nan Whaley, are piece of shit in Miller Valentine Gym. They have some egg on their face right now from the failed, development of the fairgrounds. Who knows when there will be a story emerge about that again. I talked about that at length in the other video, but it mentions future stages of development could include more affordable housing, market rate housing, a boutique hotel with spaces for public uses, retails, and restaurants. Here is the thing, YouTube. Lack of demand for public uses, retail, and restaurants is what deemed the arcade, because 25 years ago, that's what it was. Little shops, little restaurants. So it's just the same old bullshit over and over again. So, Downtown Dayton, as I've talked about this in other videos, there just is not, you know, many major, most of the employers that are down here are all government related. You got the city, county building, federal building, care source. Sinclair gets a little bit of taxpayer money for grants and salaries. So, you know, and it's, you know, you guys have seen, I did videos on the office buildings like this building across the street from here. You know, I did a walkthrough of this building about 6-8 months ago or a year ago. It's like 90% vacant. It would be cheaper to have spots for artists and living there than it would be fixing this up. So, you know, the Dayton Daily News, they also mentioned in today's article that, you know, where there's been like 3 or 4 times, oh, they had their hopes up for the arcade being redeveloped and nothing ever happened. And nothing ever happened with it. So even then, I think they're probably not too optimistic about this, because we've seen this movie over and over again. And I've talked about the best use for this would be if somehow, if they could, as much as I don't want to see any taxpayer money used for it, if it's going to have to be that way, let Sinclair buy this, turn this into classrooms and, you know, labs, and they want to talk about art space. Heck, why not make this a good extension for an art college on Sinclair, extend their footprint, you know? So there's an idea for you. So, you know, this is utterly stupid too. And this next one paragraph, of course, you've heard this story over and over again. Said city and local officials said they are cautiously optimistic about the arcade's chances of being restored because a proposal comes from experienced developers who have a strong track record of adaptive reuse success. It ain't gonna happen, people. As I mentioned, Miller Valentine Gem, they're pulling out of the fairgrounds deal, and to do what they wanted to do at the fairgrounds would have been a hell of a lot cheaper than this is gonna be. So, and it also mentions in the next paragraph, over the years there have been a series of proposals for the arcade complex that have fizzled. So, you know, it's always the same old bullshit. We are capitalizing on the value proposition that urban environments have. Dayton does not have a good urban environment, you know. So Cross Street Partners, it mentions, will be in charge of the master development, and Miller Valentine Gem will focus on the housing components. So, and it says they're under contract to buy the arcade from the current owner, Gunther Berg, who was the last hack about 3 to 5 years ago that bought it, and nothing's, you know, happened with it. Nothing's gonna happen with this, people. And it mentions if the project is awarded low income and historic tax credits, the purchase of the arcade property could close this time next year, with construction begins at the same time. But it also mentioned it could take 5 or 6 years for that to begin as well, you know. So it's just all this you know, do nothing jobs and do nothing bullshit. And as I mentioned, you know, we've saw this movie, you know, play out over and over again, and nothing happens, you know. The 2 buildings contain 113,000 square feet of space. The arcade's entire square footage extends 400,000. So affordable housing for artists and people who specialize in creative work. There's no way this is going to be affordable, people. Because as I've talked about this in other videos, and I did a walkthrough a few months ago when they were trying their dry and stable option crap, which is nothing more than a band-aid for a building that's just falling apart, you know. So it's going to be sad, but eventually this is already turned into just a big urban wasteland, and sooner or later the city leaders are going to finally have to be forced to give up on the property and realize that there's just no demand for it, that ultimately the fate will be sealed, you know, with ultimately the wrecking ball one day. It'll be a sad day, but In a town like Dayton that has a fallen population, older population, horrible job market, lack of young people, horrible schools, 90% of the city suffering. They constantly try and convince us, oh, that downtown is such a great place when it's not. But in order for this place to even have any chance to succeed, they're trying when the city is just not capable of supporting this. We just don't have the jobs in the city to support it, especially private sector jobs. We don't have the schools or the residents. And it's just more bullshit, and it's just, you know, they're not realistic about this. I mean, and the track record has been proven over and over again as countless hacks and investors who have had dreams for the idea, but they all seem to fail or realize the cost of it is just too high, or they can't scam the taxpayers out of the money they need, then it just ends up being turned back over to the city. So please say no to any taxpayer money being used for this. Make this be privately funded. If we're going to ever make a project like this work, we got to make our city strong again. That includes strong neighborhoods, not 90% of the city looking like a disaster, being boarded up, just looking like a complete joke. So, you know, let's focus on realistic goals, because the city just does not have the population or the jobs or these artsy-fartsy people to support it. And if they do, they're not going to be able to afford to live here with the cost that it would eventually take to fix it. But that's it for this one, YouTube. From the Downtown Dayton Arcade, you know, so Dayton keeps on promising, but keeps on failing to produce it. Who will save your soul when you won't save your own? And that's what Dayton is. City leaders won't save their own soul when they... Who could save their soul in their own projects when they won't save their own? That's it for this one.